Hello world, and welcome back to, or welcome to, the Pop Culture Patter podcast. As always, I'm your host, Callum Brown, and today's guest is one of my closest friends, Jamie Scott. Jamie and I go way back, and he's one of my favourite humans. We get into it about Jamie's story and how he's gone from leaving school with very little to building a successful business at Thrive Bridge of Weir. As always, this podcast is recorded with our good friends at the Podcast Studio Glasgow, the East End of Glasgow's digital creative hub, and the only studio in Scotland that offers 18 years of experience in the medium and is run by a pioneer in British podcasting. To find out more information or to book a session, please visit www.podcaststudioglasgow.com. And before we get into this episode, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Brown & Co Properties, an award-winning family-run estate agency based in Whitburn, West Lothian. With a Property Mark protected service for a fixed fee, we are your go-to agent for expert property sales advice in the area. Get on the go with Brown & Co.
Jamie Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Mate, thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
You're very welcome. Speaking of podcasts, do you have any podcasts that you listen to on the regular?
Mate, I do. This has now become a regular. I've listened to every single episode up until this point. This will probably be the first one that I don't listen to. But hopefully you can forgive me.
And can you just confirm that I haven't paid you to say that?
You haven't paid me. So yeah, this one, I like educational podcasts as well. I listen to some. There's a nutrition one, Sigma Nutrition. A big fan of that. Huberman Lab. I don't know if you're familiar with Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist. He does some really interesting stuff. And then good old Busted Open Radio, wrestling. Big fan of Busted Open. That's my routine for going to bed at night. Put that on, drift off 2 minutes into it and don't hear any of it.
Yeah. Do you tune into the likes of Joe Rogans and stuff like that? Is that something that you did at one point and are just kind of like, nah? So
for me, and I know you're a big Joe Rogan fan, right? It's just too long. It's the same with Andrew Huberman. His podcasts, I usually get the first 30, maybe 45 minutes, and then I'm like, it's too much of a commitment. So yeah, Joe Rogan, I'm just put off by his like 2-3 hours. Yeah. It's too much commitment. 30 minutes max for me.
Aye. And do you have any pop culture interests out with what you do?
So what would I say? A big music fan. I love music. I think it's I listen to it at the gym, I listen to it in the kitchen doing things. Yeah, it's actually a big part of my life, and I think it's only recently I realised just how big a part of my life music is. I didn't really consider myself a big music fan, but I do. I love music, all music.
Yeah. What do you listen to? What's your hype song?
So I think I said to you on the way in here, I was listening to a bit of Jamie T. Heard it on the radio this morning when we're heading down to Kilmarnock, so I put that on. I like everything, like Slipknot, Limp Bizkit, big Limp Bizkit fan.
Yep.
Probably my most listened to band, Limp Bizkit. Chocolate Starfish, it's my most listened to album.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of, I also like Charlie Simpson, Fight Star. Big fan of his work since he left Busted, Fight Star, the heavier stuff. And also like his solo stuff, big fan of that. And everything also like hip hop, rap, yeah, all sorts.
Yeah.
Very wide-ranging tastes.
And that's great because when I first met you were a Charlie Simpson fan and you've not changed on that. You're like, that's my guy.
He's good, man. He's good. He's underrated. Yeah, he's underrated, very underrated. I think he gets a bad rep from the Busted days, but yeah, you got to do what you got to do. I think he paved his way with that, made his money, and then decided that he was going to do what he's passionate about, and that's a cool thing to do, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Make your name and then just go and see what happens with it.
But when he went back, there was no defending him. It was like, oh God, what are you doing?
I think they've got back together again only recently. So yeah, for all the Busted fans out there, I suppose you'll be pretty happy. Now, from that accent, you wouldn't be able to pick up on the fact, but you were actually born in Eccles in Manchester.
I was,
and then you moved to Ardrishig.
Born in Trafford Hospital, huh?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, only 5 years in Manchester. Then moved to the West Coast into Ardrishig.
Yeah, and how was that experience for you moving from there to Ardrishig? Because Ardrishig's in the West Coast, isn't it?
Yeah. So I don't. To be fair, I don't remember much about it. I remember why we left. It was quite a ropey area we lived in, and I've got this vivid visual of one of our neighbours. They were in a bit of a war with another family in the estate, and I can see one of them was joyriding a car and smashed it right into the front of the house. And I can see this image in my head still, just this car like smashed through someone's house. So my parents were like, yeah, it's probably not a good place to raise a kid. So we boosted to almost the sort of opposite end of the scale, and we were in like, I grew up in a village with like 1,000 people. Go from a big city to a village of 1,000 people. So yeah, it was quite a contrast.
Yeah, and some of the experiences that you had in Ardrishaig, it's just such a small town that everybody does know everybody, you know. Yeah. It's one of those things, and through us knowing each other, I got to go to Ardrishaig Gala Day, which is like a day event that you get to go and drink with all the locals, and it was such a great, the first one was genuinely such a great experience. Yes. I think the second one I was going for a bit of shit, so I didn't enjoy it as much, but getting to meet Joe, and it was so weird that it was like I was there with you and our other friend Stephen, and I think Stuart Mackay as well, and we all travelled up together from Glasgow, and we got there, and it was one of those things that like I was there with you, but I ended up like spending the majority of my night chatting to like people that you went to school with, and then I met Joe, and I had like it was so like surreal being drunk, not knowing anybody, and just going with it. And you would end up in somebody's house, and then you'd be like, where the fuck am I? I'm supposed to be with my mate.
It's like 4 a.m. Yeah, I think you saw Ardrishaig on its one good night, and it was a good night, right? It was always a good night, but that was it. The entire year just built towards that. Every other night was pretty bleak, to be honest. It was a hard place to try and make fun, but
yeah,
we did our best, and we had some like hilarious times, did some seriously dumb shit that I still laugh about to this day.
Yeah, tell us about some of that dumb shit. I know you don't want to, but
no, it'd be okay to talk about it. I don't know if there's anything that would translate. I think it's those sort of things that you need to be there experiencing, but they're just so dumb. And you find where rural areas as well, there's so little to do that you just have to find your own fun. And there's also disproportionate amounts of like crime and drugs in these rural places, which speaks to that as well, right? We didn't have a football pitch to play on. We used to have to go and play it like our local primary school, playing in the playground there, because there was no football pitch, it was waterlogged. So there's literally nothing to do. So yeah, you have to create your own fun, and yeah, we did a lot of that.
Yeah, and you got in a lot of mischief, which led you down a path of being put up against the children's panel, I think. Yeah. Which is still an inspiring story to tell, so I'd love you to tell it.
Okay, so
I know it ties in throughout the whole.
But I guess it goes quite deep quite soon. But to get the full effect of the story, I guess I have to share it. So I guess I grew up in quite a turbulent environment. My parents, it was quite a volatile, like physically abusive relationship. Forewarning, this does go quite heavy. So yeah, there was a lot of like turbulent stuff going on in my early years. My parents separated, and often with these things, the pattern repeat itself. My mum got in another abusive relationship. It was like more emotionally abusive. Dude was an alcoholic, and tie this in with my mum's kind of like lifelong mental health struggles. Yeah, made for quite a kind of rocky childhood. And for me, looking back now, and I can talk about this quite objectively, I think some people can be a bit struck by how I can talk about it so objectively. And I think I've just done the work, and I've removed myself far enough that I can look at it like this and talk about it. But yeah, so very turbulent childhood upbringing, and for me, it led me down what I can see now is just a natural progression. Do you mean I went towards booze at like 13 years old, first time getting drunk, bottle of Mary down cider, me and 4 of our pals, like 13 years old. Again, that was then a regular occurrence, and as happens with these things, led on to drugs. So we started smoking hash, and that was how we would spend our nights. And then on with that came like criminal activity, which is how we go down the path of the children's panel. Had a pretty lengthy criminal record, which fortunately happened before I was like 17, so it's gone now. So I got it all in my system, and there's no ramifications now, but all the learnings from it. So yeah, so the accumulation of that became getting in front of the children's panel and having a kind of stage intervention, so giving a social work and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was quite an experience. And then yeah, I guess that circles or goes forward like 20, 25 years, having a conversation with my mother-in-law who says, I'm going to volunteer for the children's panel. And I was like, okay. She said, you should do it. And I laughed. I was like, I was in front of a children's panel. I don't think they're going to want me. And she was like, no, they're looking for people that have been in front of the panel and have experienced it. And I was like, okay, cool. So applied, and then sure enough got a place, went through all my training, and then I was based here in Glasgow doing some work on the panel for a short period of time. So yeah, it felt like I came full circle.
Full circle, yeah. And that's impressive, man. That always sticks with me, that story of you being that child up there. They probably have written you off, and you've come back and you're now on that panel.
Yeah, it was cool. It felt like some kind of closure in some way. It was cool. It was a cool experience, yeah. Met a lot of cool people, and I didn't share with too many of them about my experience of being in front of the panel. Didn't necessarily feel appropriate, but yeah, there was something really cool about the circular nature of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we met working for a company called River Island, a clothing company on the High Street in Buchanan Galleries. And I was there, I was on a part-time contract, but I was doing full-time hours. So I was pretty much full-time. I don't know what the situation was, but I was fully into maybe 2 years before you came along, and was it a Christmas temp or was it a summer temp?
That's Christmas temp.
Christmas temp, yeah, that makes sense. And what's your recollection of meeting me for the first time?
Yeah, I remember we were in, I can't remember if it was, I think it was the interview. So I remember I heard you talk about this on your podcast, right? You were talking about, I think you had to dress a celebrity, so we got that usual kind of thing. And then I can't remember if it was the first interview or the second interview. We were through the back in the canteen, and we were all just sitting chatting. And then you walked in, and I was like, "Fuck, he's a handsome bastard." Who's this guy? And then you kind of just cut about. You're a bit like moody and didn't really say much, like. And we were just kind of sat, and then yeah, got the job. And then it's all a bit of a blur. That whole time was a bit of a blur. But then yeah, getting on the gym floor. The shop floor, just getting to know everyone individually, and I think we started naturally being drawn towards each other. Right, we enjoyed like similar humour. Yeah, we shared a lot of interests. So yeah, it was cool. There was just like this natural drawing together, I felt.
Yeah, and I think I was the only one that wasn't taking it seriously. Everybody else was like, try to be on the radio, menswear, please pick up. I'm on the radio.
And I think that was a big part of it for me as well, actually, because I certainly wasn't taking it seriously right from the offset. So I think I recognised, all right, cool. Yeah, here's a guy who knows how to bend the rules. And
it was such a strange job as well, because they put so much pressure on you to talk to everybody, but it just ended up being you just talk to all the staff.
It was weird, man. It was quite a toxic environment, right?
Yeah.
Like, management were all pretty like, I don't want to speak bad about people, but
yeah,
it was not a nice environment.
It was intense, and they gave up on me pretty early because of how relaxed I was. And for me being like, I was relaxed at one point. This was before all my shit went down, but like at that point when I got that job, I felt like I was just a young kid. It was my first proper job, and I was just there to have a laugh and take in the Glasgow, because I'd never been to Glasgow before I got that job. So it was fun, but
it was so fun.
I remember like us like on the radios, we always used to walk about with these kind of walkie-talkie radios, and you'd have an earpiece in, and we would just be like noising people up all day. I don't think we worked too many shifts together, because they started being like, right, don't put him together with him.
They separated us, didn't they? It was and so I was only there as a Christmas temp, and what I didn't really consider with being a Christmas temp is you're expected to work in Christmas, and I was like, I'm going home for Christmas. Like, I'm going back to Argyll, which is 2 hours away. I'm not coming back for Boxing Day. I didn't know how to tell them that. Luckily, we were out on I think it was a Christmas boys' night out. We were in like a China Buffet King or something like that. And I was like, guys, I've got these spots, and I lifted up my top. And Jamie, is it Jamie McMillan?
Yes.
He was like, that's chicken pox. You need to go home. And I was like, oh shit, really? He was like, yeah. So I just jumped in a taxi, went home. Sure enough, it was chicken pox. Like the next 4 or 5 days, I was just out the game. I was just like in my bed. It just passed. I slept most of it. And then that was like maybe a week before Christmas. So it was like, cool, there you go. I'm not working Christmas. I got my Christmas holidays. Chickenpox at 26, that was rough though. That was
I know.
brutal.
I think it was Kubla Khan's restaurant in
That was
Merchant City that we went to. I don't know if it's still there or not. It was like a kind of Mongolian barbecue place.
Yeah,
and I
that's
remember that it was like you were there for 10 minutes and then you suddenly just were like, guys, I need to go home.
I just had to jump in a taxi. That was a weird. But then obviously because I didn't fulfill my Christmas, I got the boot, which I was fine with because I was starting studying in January. So the plan was just to get some money until January. So I got the boot. And then once I started studying, I was like, I should probably earn some money. So I thought about trying to go back.
Yeah.
So I was offered another interview, and it was one of the managers that didn't go on particularly well with. I don't think you got on particularly well with, who did the interview. And
Right.
did the interview. I think it went reasonably well. And then I was heading home, and I was sending a text message to you, and I said, interview went well. Only problem was it was this.
Yeah.
CUNT
Yeah.
that was doing the interview, and instead of sending it to you, I sent it to him. I sent him the message, and I was like, oh shit. And just immediately like, okay, that's the opportunity gone. Like, it's done.
And I think I know who you're talking about now. When you said him, I was like, because there was a few people I was, as I said, I was the one that was just like, go and talk to that guy over there, and I'm like, nah. And they were just like, right, I'll give up, move on.
Yeah.
But the good thing about that job was the social aspect of it. We used to go out a lot, and we were on really, really shit money. And I probably had some of the best nights out in my life on shit money, and a job I hated, but the social aspect of it was great. And I think that was when we started going out a lot more separately, and the nights out there where you would bring in other friends, and we had some amazing nights. But it remembers me of one night, I think we'd broken off from the River Island guys and went on our own night out. We headed back to your flat in the West End, and we come in, and Ross and Stuart, your flatmates, were sitting on the sofa watching wrestling, and I'm like, you guys watching wrestling?
Yeah.
I'm like, I've not watched wrestling in like 10 years, and just sat down and watched it. And it just happened to be when, I think it was maybe the episode that Punk was doing the pipe bomb.
Okay.
Because that visual just sticks with me, and I remember being like, this is actually really good. I hadn't watched wrestling since like 2000 by that point, and this was now 2009, 8 or something. And I can remember just being like, right. And from there, wrestling's been our thing. Like, it's been something that we do. And lo and behold, this weekend's WrestleMania, the biggest night of the year.
Yep.
And we always try to celebrate it by getting the guys together and going for a feast and sitting and watching too many hours of wrestling, because it's now over 2 days.
It's
but
a lot to take in.
You've been a wrestling fan throughout your life, haven't you? Has there been any times you've dipped in and out of it? Or
So I was, my first VHS was SummerSlam '89. I just saw it when I was in RS McCall's, and I do not know what attracted me to it. So I was in RS McCall's, bought that, and then I watched it like when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 11, and then I fell away from it. And similar, I got back into it when it popped back up on Channel 4. So it was Royal Rumble 2000 when that came on.
Yeah,
Channel 4, that kind of reignited it. And then I was kind of fairly consistent, but I think I'd maybe just taken a wee dip in it. And then Stuart, he was the same. He was a big fan, and he kind of dragged me back into it. Yeah, so that was my kind of that reignited the love of it, and it's not left since. And it's like you say though, it's like I still watch it weekly, but it's as much now the social side. Like I always look forward to when we get together, particularly for WrestleMania. Like it's just always a good weekend. Yeah,
it's the highlight of my year. I know that sounds really sad that the highlight of my year revolves around a wrestling show, but it's more about the camaraderie, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the banter.
The boys, you know what I mean? You get to sit around and chat shit with the boys.
Yeah, it's good fun.
And we're doing that this weekend, so I'm looking forward to that. But in terms of wrestling, I haven't actually talked about wrestling on this podcast at all, and I've got it on my logo, and I'm like, I need to get somebody out and talk about wrestling. So AEW or WWE, what is your most watched right now?
So I would say I've gone back to WWE. I over the last kind of couple of years, the way things were with Vince leading the show, and it was just, WWE was on a steep downward trajectory. It was very hard to watch, very formulaic. It was the same every week. And then AEW popped up, and it was, I guess in the business world, they talk about like disruptors. It was very disruptive. It disrupted everything, and you had a lot of big names. We were watching the first AEW pay-per-view, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Did we watch it together on Zoom? I think we Zoomed it.
Yeah, I think we
COVID,
did. Yeah,
no, it wasn't before that, but I think we Zoomed it anyway. Maybe we can get together. And then when John Moxley showed up at the end, it was just like, oh shit, like this is actually happening. And then for me, I was kind of dragged into AEW, and I think part of the appeal was like constantly signing guys from WWE that you knew had serious potential, but were maybe not getting the exposure. So yeah, it was starting to give these people a platform. Then once he started to bring everyone in and there was no more surprises and it was just kind of the raw product, it was a bit like, it's not as exciting as it was.
Yeah.
So I was in it for the glory. I was in it for just the returns and the pops and things. And then with everything that went on in WWE and now with Triple H taking over, it's definitely a lot more interesting. It's very different. So I'm back mostly WWE, but unfortunately just now I would say my time, I'm very busy and I'm not watching as much wrestling as I would like to. And I think it'd be cool to start a wrestling podcast to force myself to watch wrestling more often. And
we've chatted about that with our other mate Andy McDonald. Shout out to Andy. Yeah. We were thinking about doing that as a side of this. And we've got the podcast itch now because we are going to be doing something very soon that I'll be informing everybody of very shortly. But is there any who were your guys when you were younger to now? Like who's been your guys that have been that's my favourite guy, and then have you watched their career kind of like not take off in the way you wanted it to? Or
I would say it was obviously Hulk Hogan drags you in first of all. He was just that era that I was watching. So yeah, Hogan early doors, and then I probably missed the part with like Bret Hart was starting to emerge. Saw him kind of coming through, but didn't really see him reach his pinnacle because that's when I kind of fell away from it. And then I guess rewatching from 2000, seeing the likes of like Stone Cold, The Rock. For me, I was always a big Triple H fan.
Yeah, man.
I always found him just to be like a really technically sound wrestler. I really enjoyed his work. So he was probably someone I was a big fan of. And then I guess RVD I was a big fan of RVD, I guess.
Yep. At
that time, I'd started to get quite involved in Muay Thai, and I guess I liked the martial arts fusion he had. And I guess nowadays, it's not going particularly well, but I'm a big fan of Bray Wyatt. And that maybe speaks more to the like storytelling side of things. I think for me, I don't know if I'm that big a fan of like wrestling as such. It's maybe just the vehicle for storytelling.
Yeah,
I think that's where my love of wrestling is. It's the entertainment and the storytelling. I love the storytelling side of it.
Yeah, and that's not something that like if you were to explain to a non-wrestling fan, not that it's not a thing, but somebody that doesn't like wrestling, basically, that the stories that they tell is all storytelling. It's theatre in a way, and
complete theatre, right? And that's what's so good. It's like
these guys don't get any days off. Like they're fully scheduled. Like they're flying from one end of America to the other, weird times, having to perform live as well. It looks like it hurts as much as the whole fake argument of it. Like that's just a really bad throwaway comment. I think
it is. Yeah, it's a tedious comment. It doesn't. Yeah, it's almost like, why do you watch it when you know it's fake? It's like movies, TV, like all these things. It's the same. It's just a different. It's an amazing physical theatre, right?
Yeah, and WrestleMania is obviously this Sunday. This podcast is going to go out next Tuesday. So what's the match that most grabs you on this WrestleMania card?
For me, watching WWE over the last year, the story they've done with Roman Reigns and the Bloodline's been incredible. So, and I guess when you tie that in with Cody Rhodes' return, for me, Roman Cody is just like huge. Like I haven't probably been as excited about a match as I have since Cena and Punk back in 2011.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a long time since I've been really like drawn into something. And then I guess the other side of that, you're talking about the Usos and Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. That's going to be a big one, which I hope ends show 1 or night 1.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's going to. It looks like it's going to be Rhea and Charlotte, but I think it's Usos and Owens and Sami Zayn will be an amazing match.
Yeah, they could really do with the Usos dropping the titles to Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. They have the titles, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a weekly watcher anymore, but I pretty much just get the chat from the group chat. But on YouTube, I watch that just highlights the stuff. But I think it'd be good for them to drop the titles night 1, and then night 2, Roman drops the titles to Cody, and then Monday Night Raw, the night later, that's where they tease the Rock thing. And it's kind of just being like, they could be like, you're bringing the Rock could come up and be like, you're bringing my name down because I'm associated with this family, I'm not happy with it. Then that pushes a year program of Reigns and Rock together. And then your WrestleMania 40's headline, no title, a year feud with Rock and Roman.
Yeah, like they did with Cena and The Rock, right? The same. Yeah, just that year-long build. I don't know, I would like to see Usos keep the belts. I think it'd be good to keep them going for a while. There's a lot of chat about FTR and AEW just now, what they're going to do. I think the signs point to them staying, but I think it would be good if they do come over to WWE, be a good feud to go straight back to, because it didn't really get justice it deserved previously.
Yeah.
But I think they have to, Cody has to win, right? It'd be a missed opportunity if he doesn't beat Roman. A, who does? But then B, where does Cody go from there? So
it's a weird one, isn't it? But it also kind of feels a bit forced with Cody, but Cody's carrying it well. I've always been a Cody Rhodes fan.
You have.
That's something that I can say for.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I just knew he had star quality in him, and see, when you can see it, it was like watching Triple H in a way that you knew he had something. You were like, right, if this guy gets the right gimmick or the right push, he's going to take over, and that worked out. But I know a lot of wrestling fans are not huge on Cody Rhodes, but I just think he's great, man. So
no, I'm a big fan, particularly of his more recent work. And it is interesting, though. I think I was listening to a podcast and it was talking about this idea, like how his dad, everyone loves Dusty Rhodes, and it's like the idea of they call him, like, he was the son of a plumber, right? So a working man, and that was a big part of his appeal. And I think they try and shine some of that on Cody. But the problem with Cody is he's not like the son of a plumber. He's the son of a like wildly successful, respected wrestler, right? So there's a very different appeal. And I think he struggled in AEW in the last few months. People were really like turning against him, and it's felt like in WWE that it could go either way. I've been watching quite like each week thinking, how's this going to go, and how did they navigate the Sami situation? They navigated it well, but then I think once he's got the belt, it's like, that's kind of his story. What happens beyond there? That's going to be a tricky one to continue.
I know, and it's funny that like we all sat there for the past couple of years of being like, Roman's done, man. There's nothing that they can do with him. There's nothing the fans will want to cheer him for. And I feel like he's probably the most improved wrestler that we've seen for a long, long time, because I'm watching his promo stuff and I'm thinking, this is really good stuff. And he's holding his own with like talkers. So, and his in-ring work's improved as well. But I just think they've nailed it in the head with the bloodline.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal. I think the challenge with Rome was they were constantly trying to force him down everyone's throat as like a baby face, right? And you can see he's got like a bit of arrogance to him, a bit of swagger. It just didn't fit. But Vince was adamant, like he was just going to keep pushing it. And there was so many like people's pushes that got disrupted because they were trying to shoehorn Reigns into different angles and things. And then when they allowed him to just kind of like flip and become that little bit more of an asshole, which he naturally seems to be, everyone just like cottoned on. So I think after this, like he's got the potential to have like a pretty amazing run as a babyface, right? But he needed this period of time as a heel.
So it's like training for him almost, and he's been through a lot. They have put him through his paces
big time. Like the program with Cena, like Cena like chewed him out in front of a live television audience, right? Just like took him to pieces, but he needed that. And I guess it's the same as you're seeing with Cena and Austin Theory just now, right? He's just exposing them and seeing what happens, and it's worked so well for Reigns. Like you say, he's holding his own now in his promos and things, and and you spoke a little bit about your Muay Thai experience, that you were trained in the Grip House gym in Glasgow, and what I love about this story is that you wanted to do it. You didn't want to make a career in it. You wanted to do it, have a fight,
and if you won the fight, retire. And it's one of my proudest moments as a friend to go and watch your mate knock a guy out and just be like, I'm out here, I'm done, I've done everything I needed to do. Can you tell us a bit that kind of how that all worked out and how that came about?
Yeah. So I guess that probably circles back to some of the stuff talking about drinking, drugs, crime. Where that began to end was, and it was something they spoke about in the children's panel, is a lot of the time these things stop, these patterns of behaviour stop when they forge a positive relationship with someone. It's usually that changes it. And I met a girl at that time, and she kind of, not by anything she did, it just so happened that kind of put an end to all that. Mm-hmm. With stopping all that though, because I think that was my way of like suppressing a lot of stuff, my anxiety then started to rise. So I started to experience panic attacks and diagnosed with various things like general panic disorder, agoraphobia, these sort of things. So for me, it was trying to find some kind of positive outlet. I remember going to the doctors when I was maybe like 15, 16. So I'd just come out of that cycle of like drinking, drugs and crime, and they were trying to give me antidepressants. And fortunately, I just knew this isn't the right thing to do. I need to explore other things first. I thought I should maybe like try exercising and eating well and getting more sleep. And I'm glad I didn't just take the drug, because having used antidepressants as an older adult in a better position to do so, at that time it just wasn't the right thing to do. So met a girl and started exploring exercise as a way to kind of alleviate some of my anxiety. And there was a Muay Thai club run by a guy, Stuart Green, who I would say probably, unbeknownst to him, became a kind of role model for me. I guess when you're coaching classes and things like that, that will happen, but didn't really have a positive male role model growing up. So he just became the first one for me, and started to try and model some of his behaviour and actions and things. So he kind of drew me into Muay Thai, and we were a small club. It was on a Tuesday night. We would do some pad work and things, and then we'd get together on a Friday night and we'd spar. And it was quite something. It was a lot of fun. Just that closeness that comes with sparring. And we didn't know a huge amount about Muay Thai, and this might not mean much to you, but in sparring, all we had was gloves and a gum shield. Most of the time when you spar, you wear shin pads and you got a bit more kit on. We didn't know to wear shin pads, right? So we were just like kicking lumps out of each other, clashing shins. It was brutal. It was rough. It was, but it was good fun. Again, you form like a real close bond, a bond with people that way. And then, like, I was getting more and more into that, and it was opening up more things for me. It was making me consider how I was living my life, the choices I was making. And I've always had this desire in me for more, and I've always been quite a hopeful person that I could achieve things. I don't know where it came from. It's just kind of naturally in me. But Muay Thai definitely kind of tapped into that and started to get a little bit more interested in the gym, because I thought, well, if I go to the gym, I'll be able to like kick harder, punch harder, be like fitter, stronger. And I rented this little outbuilding. I don't know if you ever got to see it. I had this little outbuilding, a hotel in Ardrishig. It was just, this rubbish little barn. I went in to see the guy, and I was like, I'm looking for somewhere to like have a little gym. And he's like, I've got this unit. You can have it for £20 a month. And I was like, okay. So I went to see it. It was perfect. So I got started taking all the weights out of my bedroom, got some punch bags hung up, and we'd go and train there. That was probably where Chocolate Starfish by Limp Bizkit got the most plays. It was just on repeat in there. And it was termed Jam's Gym, because that was, I guess, who I was back then. I was Jam. Yep. So it was Jam's Gym. And we used to go around there and do training, like hit a punch bag, and there's so many daft things in there. Ross, our friends Ross and Brian, trained so hard one day that they couldn't move their arms. They couldn't bend their arms for like the next 4 days. Like, they just couldn't. It was amazing. And we'd go there and spar, just do all sorts of stupid shit. So that's when this kind of love of exercise was starting to get fueled, and the recognition of, man, it gives me a proper positive outlet for all these like things I feel inside me. So I trained there. I trained at that club for maybe 6 or 7 years, and there's a series of events that kind of changed, I guess, my circumstances. I was, at the time, I was working in Dewsons. So I'd been a roofer, done my time as a roofer, worked on roofs for like 6 years. And I guess that's where I met probably my second like male role model, my boss, Lee, at the time, we kind of slotted into this role of like almost like brothers. Like he was like an older brother, and I think I got sacked from that job like 9 times, but he would like always feel sorry for me and then rehire me. But he used to say to me all the time, like, you're shite at roofing. Like, I'm not hiring you because you're good at roofing. I hire you because I think you're funny. I was like, I'll take it. You're paying me. I don't give a shit. So, yeah, I was with him for ages, and I lost my train of thought there.
Jewson's.
Yeah, so I was in Jewson's, and so I was in Jewson's, and one day, phone rings just as I'm finishing work, and I answer it, and it's my dad. Don't have a particularly close relationship with my dad, but we kind of speak every now and again. And he'd mentioned that my half brother on his side had committed suicide. So it's like, this was something that just like, I just felt it like almost hit me immediately. And it was like, I just kind of stood upstairs alone in Jewson's for like half an hour, like trying to absorb this. And I wasn't close with Simon, my brother, my half brother, but I'd met him a lot of times when I was young, and he was like, I guess I naturally slotted into that role of like looking up to him. And it was just around that time that social media was starting to like pop up. So Bebo, MySpace, things like that. And I'd been meaning to like, for a year or two, I was thinking I should just find him and contact him and just see what's going on. And some of my friends, they'd been up to Glasgow for a night out, and they bumped into him and they told me, and I was like, oh shit, that's amazing. And then, so found out he's committed suicide. Go home, MySpace, search his name, find his profile within like 30 seconds. And there's just this feeling of like, fuck, I should have done this like so much sooner. But I took some time to process that. The relationship I was in at the time, that was starting to dwindle down. The anxiety that I was experiencing was putting a lot of pressure on that. She was going off to university, and I was like, at that time, probably living in a very, very close circle. I was going through a period of what people would often refer to as like agoraphobia. So there was this feeling of like, fuck, I cannot let Simon like him die in vain. So I need to do something about this, and what I'm doing just now is just wasting my life. So I made this like conscious decision that things were going to be different, and over the next kind of few months started to try and rebuild myself, and with some amazing support from, again, Ross McDonald, who you know, and his brother Rory. They kind of like dragged me through this really shit time in my life. And Ross was moving down to Glasgow at the time, and again, this is when I was in kind of that peak or that height of my anxiety, and I was pretty much going nowhere. I wasn't going anywhere outside Ardrishig. I hadn't left Ardrishig at one point for 4 years. And you know how small Ardrishig is, right? So it's this tiny little village. My head had just gone. I hadn't left the country in 12 years. I'd been on holiday like when I was a bit younger, but I hadn't since. So it was like in this really like closed circle. And Ross was moving to Glasgow, and I was like, fuck it, I just need to do something. So I was working in Jewson's at the time. I had minus £300 in my bank account, so I'm in my overdraft. And I said to my boss, I said, I'm going to leave and I'm going to go to Glasgow. And he said, it's a terrible idea. Do not do that. And I was like, I appreciate your advice, but I'm going to. So gave my 2 weeks notice, and I was getting all ready for it. And I remember the weekend before I moved was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. It's like I was moving on the Sunday afternoon. We were just going to pack up my car and go. And the Saturday, there was this feeling of, I've still got the safety of Ardrishig, but there's this like apprehension for what's about to come, because I was really fearful of like going and doing it and coming back and it failing. Because for me, it would have been like, that probably would have been like the end, right? It would have been, I couldn't have come back from that. So there was so much weighing on it. And Sunday comes, and it sounds to someone like that, it's hard to describe, but in my headspace, I probably couldn't have done anything more. Like, you hear stories of people moving to other countries and things. I think at that time for me, that was probably the equivalent, right? Didn't have family in Glasgow, hadn't spent any time in Glasgow, didn't know anyone in Glasgow. Any kind of like distant family I had was down south in England, so I didn't know Glasgow. So we just packed up my car and drove down. And on the Sunday, there was a show which the Grip House put on at the Moor. And there's one of the boys we know, Dave, was fighting. So we went down and we went in to watch the show, and it was like, this is amazing. Like, this is so good. And watched the show, and then travelled to where I was going to be staying with my friend Russell, moved in with him for a bit. Just so happened that the grip was like a 5-minute at most walk from the house. So I was like, shit, it's a sign, like I need to go here. And to be fair, I'd been researching a lot about the grip house and things before I went. I knew a lot about their coaches. I was really, really interested to go and see. But then when you step foot in there, like that place is unreal.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's this like really modest, unassuming building. You wouldn't think much of it. It's on kind of like the outskirts of Possil.
Yeah.
You go up like to the 4th floor, I think it's on the 4th floor. You open the door and there's just this smell that hits you, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's the smell of like perspiration and like blood, sweat, tears.
Yeah.
It's just like this, and it does something like in your gut when you walk through the door.
Aye.
And I remember the first time going in, walking in, and it was Jojo Calderwood, or Jojo Wood as she's now known. She's like multiple fights in the UFC, but at the time she was just predominantly focusing on Muay Thai, and I think she was a world champion at that time. So you walk in and she's just like showing you around, chatting away to you, and I'm like, I know who she is and I know what she's done, and she's just like really humble and down to earth. And there's other dudes that I knew, like one of the main coaches there, MMA, I think he still coaches a lot, is Paul McVeigh, like a pioneer of MMA. He was just like, hi mate, how you doing? I mean, there's all these people that like you look up to, they're on a pedestal and they're just like so humble and kind and nice. And then started attending a few classes, and Guy, who I think's co-owner of the grip, and then Tommy Young, who's moved on to open another gym, just like unreal. It was just amazing, just like being in that environment, soaking up all that knowledge. And at the time I was there, they had a guy who I think fought out of there, moved into MMA, a guy Sean Wright. He was on the Muay Thai Contender TV series, so I've been watching that.
Right.
It's like watching on the TV, and then 6 months later sparring and getting winded by him. I remember being like pretty chuffed. He winded me, like the guy off the telly winded me. It's like, that was a cool thing. It's not something to be overly proud of, but just an amazing environment where you've got like really focused, driven people, but also like being really kind and bringing others up. That's why it's such a successful gym. So yeah, got in about that for a long time, or a couple of years I was there. But as I was saying, the first day I came up to Glasgow, we were at that Orm Moore show. It just so happened that I got asked to fight on the show the following year. So again, it was quite a nice like cyclical thing. It was like that first time I was there as a spectator, didn't know anyone, didn't know anything about the grip house, trained, loved my training, and then it was 1 year later I was asked to go and fight on the show. And it was one of those things, like, Guy said to me, are you interested in fighting? And I was like, yep. I said, yep. In my head I'm like, fuck no. And he's like, cool, there's a show, we'll get you on. And he didn't mention anything about it. And I was like, okay, cool. And I think this was about like 8 or 12 weeks out. And in my head I was like, I guess being so like kind of contained or like ruled by my anxiety, the thought of like doing something like that was insane. But I just said to myself, like, just take it session by session. Don't think about the fight, just session by session. Like in my head, some days I was saying like, you don't need to fight, it's fine. You don't have to fight. But I just took the steps. I was like, show up to training, show up to training, show up to training. And then there comes this point where it was like, for me, it was like, I actually want to test myself now. So kind of 3 or 4 weeks before the fight, I was like, I actually want to see what I'm capable of. And that's when I started to settle into it and really enjoy it. And there's this feeling of like, you've done what you've done. There's only so much you can do now. So obviously had all you guys there. We had about I think 15 people. Yeah. I think it was a crowd of 600 people, which was like, I've never been in front of a crowd of 600 people. Yeah. And to fight in front of a crowd of 600 people was quite something. But I remember the day. It was a very surreal experience, like showing up, getting weighed in. I remember seeing the dude I was fighting and just immediately thinking, he's going to fuck me up. But there was this cool acceptance, right? It was like, I'm going to go with it. Yeah. Like, I'm just going to go with it. And you know those drummers that you see on Buchanan Street? I don't know if they're still alive, but you know, it's what they call Caledonian.
I never know, but you know, if you've been in Glasgow once, you know who they are.
Them. So they opened the show, so they were in the ring drumming, and I just remember standing up, like I was warming up on the pads, I was getting kind of you get a nice massage. It's not exactly a relaxing massage, just get blood flow and get you warmed up.
Yeah.
And I could hear these drums and like see if I go back into town and I hear it taps into something deep inside me.
Wow.
There was a guy who fought first, so I was on second. Guy who went out first. I don't think I watched it. I think I was just kind of getting myself prepped, getting myself ready. And then they're like, right, it's time to go down the stairs. And I was like, oh shit, here we go. Walked downstairs, talking about my love of music. Had Floods by Fight Star as my entrance music. Again, similar to the guys with the drums. Whenever I hear it, it taps into something deep. And it starts with like quite a melodic piano.
Yeah.
And it was like hearing it echo around the Ormore, which is like a big kind of like church. And it's like a church. Yeah. It was unreal. And then, head down, walked out, got in the ring. And it was just like, once you're in there, and you see the person that you're fighting, everything else just goes. There's just nothing else around you.
Oh, wow.
And you're just aware of him, and that's it. And bell rings, and then you literally just switch into it because you've been sparring, you've been training, you just switch into something that's almost like programmed in your head.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate how it went. I think I'm 6'6", I'm very long, quite slim, lean, so I was fighting at 85 kilos. But I'm 6'6", so afterwards I was chatting to the guy and he's saying he just couldn't figure me out, so he couldn't work out how to get in close and maybe do damage, so I was just kicking him. I remember one of the other guys from the gym saying, that was impressive, but now you need to learn how to box and kick, because I just kicked the entire time. But I thought, I've got these long legs, it makes no sense to let him in.
Yeah.
And I could see he was starting to get frustrated, and I was starting to hurt him with some body shots or kicks to the body. Third round, I was starting to, like, the adrenaline was starting to wear off, and I was almost starting to become a bit bored in there, right? I wasn't getting anything back. I maybe just needed a shot or something to wake me up and get me back in it, but there wasn't really much happening. And then I think it was about a minute or a half into the third round, throw a head kick and it lands and he goes down. I didn't knock him out. For me, I think he just didn't want to continue. He wasn't like unconscious.
Right.
It landed, and I'm sure it wobbled him, but I think for me, he was kind of like, I don't want to be in here anymore.
Yeah.
And he just stayed down. And then, fuck, that feeling, like, yeah, that was some feeling.
To us, though, that looked like you knocked him out.
Yeah,
and see the pop.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Oh, man.
Amazing.
Like, I was filming it as well. It was, at the time, I was fancying myself as a filmmaker, and I'd bring my shitty little camcorder.
Which I think I've still got with it. I should probably give you that back. I think the video's still on there as well.
I would probably just be like shaking like the camera all the time. You probably don't get anything. I was properly being like, right, I want to get him coming down the aisle, and I want to be like a tracking shot of him, and then all of that went out the window because I was too busy watching the actual fight.
If nothing else, it would have been good to hear what you guys were all saying as well. But yeah, it was
you might be able to pick it up on I don't know how good the audio was on it, but
that moment where this dude stays down and the ref's like calls it off, it's like just this huge sense of relief. It was an incredible feeling. It was amazing. Amazing seeing all you guys going wild. And yeah, it did get quite a big pop in there, right? Yeah. It's on YouTube. The video's still on YouTube.
Oh, nice.
And the guy that recorded it, he's done a nice job of, as the kick lands, he kind of cuts to a different shot, and it does look like he goes out.
Right.
He goes down quite hard. So yeah, it looks better on YouTube. And I was actually watching the video because I dip in and out of Muay Thai just now. And I'm training over with some boys over at Base Muay Thai in Linwood. The young team there, they're all like 22, 23, some are a little bit younger, but it's fun to be around dudes that young.
Yeah.
But just because I dipped back into it, I was watching the video back, and it's funny. Someone's put a comment, as you always get with these keyboard warriors and YouTubes. Someone had just put like a comment saying "buffdies," just one word and all in capital, just like "buffdies." Like, who does that? Who's that drawn to make a comment on like a video of two guys fighting in a like pub in Ormore?
Yeah,
it was hilarious. Yeah.
I know, it was such a good day. It was so surreal seeing your mate in there. It just was wild. But the training of it, like, did you took it very, very seriously because you were training? But what kind of discipline did you have to have?
So I don't think I took it as seriously as I should have. I could have. I was very happy with what I did, but I think I could have done more. I didn't know what I didn't know at that time, right? But one of the boys we used to work with, Ray, I don't know if you remember Ray, at River Island, he was a sports psychologist. And I thought, I'm going to give him a shout and see if he can just help me prep. I mean, it's like, it was classed as a pro fight, right? So I've got one professional fight, retired, undefeated, right? One professional fight. But I wanted to use it as an experiment to test myself and just see what I could achieve. So I gave him a shout, and he helped me with a little bit of the psychology of it all, in terms of like making a plan and actioning a plan and making sure that when you get in that ring, in that moment, you know that you've done everything you could have done. And I felt like that in the ring. In hindsight, now knowing what I know and how disciplined I am and things, I could have done a lot more. But at that time in the ring, I genuinely believe like I've done everything I could have done.
Yeah.
And it was a good feeling.
And do you think if you lost that fight, you would want to do it again?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know. Probably. I don't know. I'm not sure. Because I think you hinted at when you were bringing this up, for me, there was something about, and I maybe didn't know it at the time, after that fight, something in me just, like, there was a switch that just kind of like flipped. And it was like, whatever that I was trying to get out of this, I've got out of it. So you got a lot of people who maybe set the goal of like winning titles and things like that, and they're driven towards that. I didn't necessarily have any ambitions of doing that. For me, I think there was probably something about like, I was brought up by a woman. There was these feelings of like, am I masculine enough? Am I a man? Do you know what I mean? So there was I wanted to test myself. And I think there was just something that after that one fight, it just like, a switch went off, and I was like, it proved to me whatever I needed it to prove to me. I continued to train, and there was talk of a second fight, but it just didn't really transpire for whatever reason. I think I was kind of wrapping up my studies at that time. And then there was a bit of a decision when I moved into like self-employment. I thought, well, I can't really be rocking up to work all beat up, particularly with the type of clients that I'm trying to appeal to. So I kind of made the decision to put fighting and even Muay Thai, I think at that time, put that a little bit more into the background. Plus I'd been training at a smaller club, and the training was amazing, but we'd maybe not structured it in the best way, and my body was really beat up. So by the time I got to the grip house, I'd probably picked up some not great habits, and I was already pretty like physically beat up, like sore back, sore shoulders, sore neck. So I was only at the grip for 2 years, and I just think like, what would have happened if I'd been there a bit sooner and even longer? Like, God knows what could have happened. But
talking about that masculinity as well, is it quite refreshing to know that if somebody was to try and start on you on a night out or something like that, you'd know how to handle them?
It's a tricky one, right? Because martial arts is very different than like being involved in a fight in a street. I think for me, I'm not like a naturally aggressive fighter. I'm quite a lazy, composed, like maybe more reactive or counter fighter. So I don't know how I'd respond to that in a street fight. I don't know if I've got that kind of aggression. I don't know. I'd have tools that I could use, but I don't know how I'd respond in that situation. Yeah.
And then from there you went on to study at college. And you had the vitamin J thing going on as well, which was like the birth of what your kind of self-employment was. But what was the actual course called at college that you took part in?
So I studied for a few years, reason being left school with no qualifications. Again, hinting back at that like turbulent upbringing. I left school with nothing. Like I think I had 2 3s at standard grade. So it was like 2 generals at standard grade, and that was in English and maths. So I had no real qualifications. I tried to do distance learning with like exercise and well-being, but it was a tough thing. It was a very dry thing to do on your own, particularly back then when there was no technology. It wasn't video lessons. It was all like out of a book. It was really dry, so it didn't really work out. So I started in like, is it an NQ or an NC? I don't know what it was, like one of the lowest ones you can do. And it was like a 6-month qualification. And it was funny because at the time, I think it was at that time, I started seeing a girl who'd just wrapped up her PhD and she was like, some of her papers and things had been published, and I was like, shit, I can't tell her I'm doing an NQ. I was like, so I told her I was doing a degree just to save face. And NC or an NQ. Then I went on to the HNC, completed the HND, and for me, there was then the option to go down the route of university. I didn't really feel like it was something I wanted to do. By that point, I'd made up my mind that I wanted to go more into the personal training side of things. Sports science is typically the only option when it comes to furthering an HND in health, exercise and fitness, or it was at the time. It's maybe not now, there's maybe other options. So I didn't really feel like university was the route to go down. Plus, I'd kind of ripped the arse out of my student days, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this much longer. So you mentioned Stephen earlier. Stephen and I, we met on the NQ, came really close, did the HNC and HND together, and then he went off to university, and I kind of just took a different path. So he kind of continued that study route, but also like that party lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
And then I switched into personal training, and it was probably...
Did you meet Andy at college as well?
Andy was in the HNC as well. I think after the year HNC, he kind of decided it just wasn't really for him.
Yeah.
So went off and got a job doing other things. But yeah, I think like making that switch into personal training was an important part of my life. For me, it kind of started a new chapter. It was like, I knew that if I was going to be a professional, I needed to put a lot of shit down. And personal training is a funny thing, right? If you're a doctor or a dentist, like you're judged on the work you do at work, right?
Yeah.
Personal training, it feels a little bit more invasive. It's like, I feel like people are looking at all aspects of my life. Do you know what I mean? And that's probably something I put upon myself. I don't think people really cared, right? But there's this feeling of like, I need to be a professional in all walks of life. So like, I can't be like out getting pissed up all the time. And again, maybe that's not true, but I needed to think like that anyway, because I needed to shake off a lot of the kind of the shit I was doing. My life had got a lot better. I'd made kind of progress in like my anxiety and things like that with moving to Glasgow. But I think it's only recently I've realised how bad my relationship with alcohol was. Like it was at least 2 or 3 times a week I would be like steaming drunk.
Yeah.
And for me, it masked a lot of shit as well. So yeah, I think in hindsight now I've got that distance from it. I can see like it was good to get out of that.
Yeah, but it's always the kind of thing you have to go through as well, because you had to make that choice. And like I missed out on so many nights out with you guys because I didn't live in Glasgow at that point, and it always used to frustrate the life out of me because I was just like seeing you guys out all the time, and I'm like sitting in my fucking parents' house in Whitburn being like, I should be out there, man, I should be out. But some of the nights were wild from the sounds of it. But coming out of college and starting the fitness, personal PT basically, but that's now blended into what you do for a living now in a different way. You're not just a personal trainer now. You're kind of like a well-being coach, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, I think. So when I first started out, you go through your certifications and you learn about exercise and you're like, yeah, this is it. This can change people's lives. And then you start applying it and you're like, I'm not really changing people's lives here. Like maybe exercise isn't the answer. So you start to learn about nutrition. And you're like, yeah, it's nutrition. That's what it is. It's nutrition that's going to change people's lives. And then you realise, it's not that either. I'm like, oh shit, what now? So then I start to look at going down the route of like counselling and psychotherapy, which I've done. I went to, I did like a year-long course in counselling skills, and then that led me on to a postgraduate diploma in counselling and psychotherapy. And for me, it was like, yeah, that's it. And then you quickly realise it's not the individual aspects, it's the integration of them all, right? It's the integration of nutrition, well-being, like lifestyle, exercise, all these things. It's the fine interplay of them that creates health.
Yeah. And you've got a team at Thrive now, and like you just said to me that you just did like a postgrad, and I'm like, how mental is that you've said you walked away from school with nothing? You would have never been able to imagine that you've went and done something like that.
Big time.
But you've assembled a team at Thrive, so you give a lot of different services. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of services you offer?
So we offer personal training, physiotherapy, we've got yoga and Pilates classes, we've got counselling services, and we've got holistic therapies and massage. And for me, again, this was born out of frustration. I remember when I was a personal trainer, I'd have someone that comes to me and wants help, and they're like, I've got this sore knee. and I don't know what to do about it. And I'd be based in Clydebank, but I'd have a relationship with a physio in Glasgow, and I'd say, right, you need to go and see this physio in Glasgow. So there was all this disruption to the person that was like desperately seeking help, and I felt like it was just barriers. So for me, Thrive is removing as many of those barriers as we can. And for me, I want to wear that responsibility of like, when someone comes to my door, whatever they need, we can take care of that in-house. I don't want them to feel that weight. So yeah, we've got people that, and it's one of the tough things with particularly personal training, okay? A lot of people come to my door looking for help. Exercise is a very accessible way to change, but it's not always what that person needs, right? They maybe need some other intervention, whether it's maybe counselling, maybe they need to work on their mental health before the physical health, or maybe they've got a physical ailment that will only be worsened by personal training or exercise at that time. So it's being able to catch anyone that needs help. I feel really proud of it just now. So I think my youngest client just now is like 18, and my oldest client I've got just now is just about to turn 93.
Yeah.
I've got people in there who are challenged by Parkinson's. I've got people with like serious kind of spinal complications and issues. So we've got such a range of people, and we're able to help them, and it's amazing, an amazing feeling.
Yeah. And did you feel that, like, going back before Thrive, did you feel that you were starting to become a bit of a therapist for people because you're being the personal trainer, and they're kind of offloading all their mind shit on you, as well as trying to get a pump on, you know?
Yeah.
Like, did you find that was kind of the case, that people were kind of opening up?
100%. They talk about it. There's quite a few industries, I can't remember the exact phrase for it, but you look at like hairdressers, bartenders, there's like certain arenas that people are probably more likely to open up. I think there's also something about it being a stranger, right? But yeah, definitely, I recognise quite quickly, like, people would tell me things that, I've had clients tell me things that they've not even told their partners. Do you know what I mean? Like, and some really like important, like heavy things for them. So it lends itself well to opening up. You think about, particularly, I've always worked in private spaces, right? So, or not always, I was in a pure gym for a year, which was a tough experience, partly because of that. It's so busy, so fast paced. It kind of loses some of what's good about personal training. But I've usually always been in kind of private spaces, so there's not many other people around, so it makes for kind of deeper conversations and allows for like revelations. And I think, I had a few people kind of share quite important things with me, and I was like, I've got a responsibility to make sure that these people are looked after, right? So that was the kind of reason for going down the route of counselling, so I could at least, if they shared something with me, I could, like, I guess in counselling we talk about holding someone, right? And it's not physically holding someone. It's like, if you've ever had that, you're having a conversation with someone and you reveal something quite important, and they either just like change the subject or like almost ignore it. It feels like you've just been dropped, right? So in counselling there's this idea of like catching and holding people. So I wanted to make sure that if people were telling me important things, I could at least like stand with them while they kind of went through it, and then have people around me that I could be like, well, have you considered exploring this with a trained therapist? Or so it was just ensuring we had everything in place to keep people safe, because it's quite an unregulated industry, personal training, and it's one of the frustrations I've had over the years, right? There's no relationship with the NHS. I don't know how many personal trainers there are in the UK. I've got to guess well into the hundreds of thousands, all working hard, passionate about helping people, but we don't have a link up with the NHS. Like, the NHS have publicised figures about the burden, and I kind of say that using quotations, the burden of obesity. It's a really like short-sighted and like disrespectful way to talk about people living with obesity, but they talk about the burden of it, but there's no willingness to engage with personal trainers, and maybe that is partly due to our industry being unregulated, but I feel like there should be a coming together. And I've had it before. I've tried to contact local doctor surgeries and things like that and say, look, if there's anything I can do to help, but there's an unwillingness there to link up, and it's tough. It's a tough thing to navigate, and it's frustrating, because I feel there's so many people out there that are willing to help, but just aren't able to help as much as they'd like. So
and because you're having to take all that in, like, you're not supposed to be taking all that from people now that you've made that part of your job, but like, what do you do to yourself to like make sure you're not carrying that weight? You know what I mean? Like, what do you have to do?
I think there's something about my past and my experiences that have hardened me enough that I don't wear the weight of that. I'm not cold. I guess, again, going back to doctors, you think about doctors, imagine doctors were highly sensitive and empathetic. Like, they wouldn't be very good at their job, right? There needs to be a kind of learned hardness. And I think I learned that maybe earlier in my life and probably became a bit closed off and a bit like desensitized to things, and I've had to open that back up. And I think that's probably what this has helped me do, right?
Yeah.
This has probably helped me, be more empathetic and care more about people. And I think when I boil it back to what this all comes down to, there's definitely a feeling of like, I'm trying to create or be something or someone that I needed when I was young.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The sort of person I would have loved to look up to or model or have around me. I'm trying to create that, and I know what it's like to change. A lot of people I work with are overweight and they want to lose weight. I've never been overweight and had to lose weight, but I know how hard change is, right? I've had to make wildly big changes in my life, so I know how hard change is. I know how frustrating it is, so I can guide people on that journey. And there's a part of me that could be perceived as dangerous, but it's not dangerous. That I want to kind of protect people from that. I don't want them to feel that like lost feeling that I had.
Yeah.
And I've worked on that. It's not like a need. I'm not trying to be some kind of like guru. And I don't think, it's coming from a good place now. I want, people come to me often feeling lost, not knowing where to turn. It's like, cool, I can help you with that.
Yeah.
And I wear some of that weight for them so they don't feel that pressure or that stress.
Yeah. And how much of like learning to do the counselling helped you personally? Because I suppose you have to kind of understand it to be able to do it.
I would say by that point, I'd done the work I needed to do myself.
Right.
And it's one of the challenges when you go through these courses. There's a lot of people there that maybe haven't experienced therapy, which I would encourage, if you're going to do something like that, have some time in therapy so you understand it. But it can almost become therapy for them. And that's not to say that's wrong or inappropriate, or that's not for me to say.
Yeah.
But I was at a stage where I'd done all my work at that point, and not done all my work, were ongoing projects, right? But the things that I'd endured, I was at peace with, and I was able to build upon that rather than like live it out. So I was kind of through that. So it didn't for me, but I saw it with people I studied with. It dragged up a lot of stuff, and was quite challenging for them.
And that kind of birthed a kind of 6-week kind of mental health group that you ran and invited me and a few others into. And I've spoke about this on many of my episodes, and Jamie's the man that put this all together. And I don't know if I learned so much about myself from that 6 weeks, more than I learned in therapy and more than I learned from the past year. There was just something about that group that was just the perfect time for me. And it just was right. And the things that we were talking about put everything into perspective. And I feel like I've become a better person out of that 6-week course. And that to me is amazing. Like, is that something that you plan to roll out constantly and do on a bigger scale? Were we the kind of guinea pigs, and would you want to do that on a bigger scale?
So it's an interesting question, and this is something I'm kind of like, there's a tension, because it was, as you said, there was a magic to that group, right? And I kind of invited people to it because I had, like, obviously was aware of your circumstances, and there was other people, and I thought, if we kind of came together and shared some stuff, it would be wildly powerful. So I think there's a magic in it that I don't know how easy it would be to recreate.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's now set such high expectations. Like, you talk about what it did for you, it did a huge amount for me as well. And I think you've started this podcast like 6 months ago. This was an idea, and now you're sitting 10 episodes in, we're having this conversation. Like, it's phenomenal, right? It's insane.
And it's because of that group that this has happened. Like, everything because we were finishing up in the last session, and it was a kind of like, right, where are you going to go from here? What are you going to do? What are you going to chase? And I was at that point where I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I kind of was, I don't know. And you were like, you spoke to me about the podcast thing for years. Like, why don't you go into it? And I think I said on the call, I was like, nah, I don't think I'm going to do anything with that, because I was so self-doubting myself that I could do it. And here we are, 10 episodes in, I'm getting comfortable each week, and that in itself is powerful. And I want more people to have access to stuff like that, because I know how much it did for me. I know how much it did for David. David's now started David Financial Coaching, and we're all motivating each other as well. That's the thing, that it's not like, right, that's that 6-week group, cheers guys, see you later. It's, we're constantly messaging, we're constantly being like, what have you got going on? Or even just, what about this advice, or what about that? It's just such a powerful group to be a part of. And thank you very much for inviting me into that, because that, at that point, I didn't know where I was going. Now I know where I'm going. I've got that drive, I've got that focus, and it was all down to that group. So I owe you everything.
And I really appreciate you saying that, but there's also something in it, like, you engaged in the group, right? So you're saying, again, I'm grateful for you saying it, but you took the steps. And it's the same with personal training clients. I've got clients that say, like, I couldn't do it without you. And like, I appreciate that. That's a really kind thing to say, but you could have, and you probably would have. You'd have found someone, do you know what I mean? So for me, it's important not to put too much into one certain thing like that. You would have found a way. You were looking for a way, and it just so happened that there was a way there, but you'd have looked for a way. And this is when it comes into, like, for me, fitness, health and well-being, one of the big trends we're seeing just now is online coaching, right? Everything goes online. You can have a high volume of clients. One of the constant adverts I see as a personal trainer is get more clients, get more clients, get more clients. And it makes me think, like, why do you need more clients? Like, what, are you not looking after the ones you've got? Because if there's a high turnover of clients, you're constantly needing to chase more clients. For me, it's more about, I really like depth of relationship rather than volume of relationships. I don't want to be someone that works with like hundreds of thousands of people on a kind of, it's still a meaningful level, right? But there's not as much depth to it. There can't be, right? I love the depth of relationships. That's the thing I really enjoy. So I'm really happy in, like, the little village I'm at. Like, I would say all around the gym just now, we've probably got about 100 people all in between our different groups. And with that, you can have like a real depth and knowledge of each of those people. Like, and I love that. That's the sort of thing I love. I'm not so interested in the volume. And going back to the group, it's like the tension is, how do I roll it out? I don't want it to just become this mass, like, churning out like hundreds of people. Because then it'll lose some of the magic. So that's something I'm still trying to figure out just now. So for me, it's trying to find a formula that, I mean, maybe I go and teach it to other people and they can have that depth of those people, because I think the depth of relationship needs to be there somewhere. It doesn't necessarily need to be me. But if we can teach it to other people and they can go and have that depth.
And for those out there that are listening, that they've heard me rabble on about how well this 6 weeks course has changed my life, like, what was the structure and the plan and the idea of it, so that people understand, that we give them a wee insight into that kind of course? Because as you said, like, even if they take some of the information away from it, is great, but just explain what the course kind of was, basically, if that would be all right.
So where it stems from, I guess, is when I'm delving deeper into the kind of psychology counselling, and a lot of my, like, coaching, nutrition coaching and personal training, there's the coaching science that comes with it. So there was a lot of learning from that. And for me, there's a lot of that that's very abstract. So it's like, how do you action that? And that's one of the big things for me. I'm big on action. It's all very well, like, thinking about things and planning things, and that's important, right? We need to do that. There's a cool phrase, this idea of, like, if you're going to chop down a tree, spend 5 hours sharpening the blade and then 1 hour chopping down the tree. Is that math? 6 hours chopping down a tree, 5 sharpening the blade, 1 hour chopping it down. Then you get the point. So deliberation and things is an important part of it, but there also needs to be action at the end of that, right? Because we could just spend all day thinking. And I guess I noticed that myself at times. There was a lot of procrastination and thinking about things. So it's very much about driving action. And then it's like, well, what action do I take? How do I know what action to take? So it starts with understanding, I guess, who you are and where you came from. What are the the most important things we did was right back at the start of it, we shared with each other like who we were and where we'd been. And then there's recognizing that there's two ways you can view that story, right? You can see it as inhibitory, or you can see it as a strength, right? All that shit I've been through, like, I'm extremely resilient, right? There's very little that can rock me. So it's like recognizing that what's happened in your past can be used as a strength if you allow it to be. And then there's tuning into like your priorities and your values. So what's important? And once you start to understand these things, like very clear paths open up. It becomes a case of, right, based on this being important to me and a priority, I'm going to stop doing that, and I'm going to stop doing that, and then I need to do this. And I'm doing some work just now in what's called like exponential psychology, and it's all about like further growth. And it's this idea that the wilder your goals are, the less paths there are to take. So in some ways it's actually easier to reach really massive goals because it rules so much shit out, right? Whereas if you're just aiming for a little bit better, it's quite hard because there's so many potential avenues. So yeah, it's about understanding who you are, where you've been, and sharing that with people. It's about understanding your own values and priorities, and then it's about what action are you going to take in line with those. And
it was pretty powerful stuff, and I still just can't believe how much we've achieved from it, and it's done wonders for me, and goals are a now thing that I'm starting to set, and I think it's quite healthy to give yourself goals, not goals that are like I used to have. Like I used to think, right, if I'm into something, I'm going to do this, whereas now I'm like, right, my goal is to get up in the morning. What's next? Right, go out a walk. It's just like little goals like that, and you feel like the more you tick off in your day, the better you feel, and the less like in your own head about it. And I think the one thing from the group is it's so simple. When you put everything into perspective, like what's your three core values? Like your health, your family and friends' health, and being able to afford to live. You know, that they're all so simple.
Yeah, for me it's family, my own health, and work, and business, building my business. So anything out with those, it's kind of a hard no, right? It's like, no. And just now I'm probably really deep in a period of like closing myself off. I'm quite antisocial, but it's kind of by design. I think a lot of people go through these stages of like head down, hard work. If it's not in school, it's maybe university or when they just come out. I missed out on all that, right? So I'm having that period just now of like building something important. I'm a little bit older, but I'm going through that process just now. So I think one of the things I can be guilty of is like friends, right? I don't spend as much time with friends as I would like to, but as I was kind of reassessing things as of late, I realised how important they are, and I guess my health, right? So that does fit into my health. So it just helps highlight things that, helps highlight paths. And the important part of it was action, right? You said about that, that last session. It was like we spent 5 weeks talking about a lot of cool shit. What are we going to do now? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are you going to do about it? I
know. And you've always got that good way about you that, like, if I was like, I don't know, you'd be like, think about it. You know what I mean? Like, it was just so good. And you have now gone into a chapter where you're going to be a dad for the second time.
Yes.
So how excited are you for that?
So for me, it's a funny thing. It's quite, I use the word abstract. It's still quite abstract for me. So we actually had 20-week scan today. So it's feeling a little bit more real. But my wife, Katie, she's pregnant and experienced these things, and her body's changing. She's feeling things. To her, it's very real. Now, obviously, I can see her body change, but it doesn't feel that real yet. And there's maybe something about like ignorance is bliss. So I can just like, I'll deal with this in August when the baby arrives, right?
Yeah.
It's obviously not as simple as that, but having Nina is like, I can't even put into words like how much it's changed me.
Yeah.
And yeah, the feelings, like the love I have for this kid is insane, like insane. It's made me realize this. People talk about like unconditional love or unconditional relationships. I personally don't think there's any other relationship outside of a parent and a child where love can be unconditional. You think about like between partners, something could happen and fracture that relationship. Even you see siblings falling apart, right?
Yeah.
I even think a child and a parent. I'm not particularly close to either of my parents. There's probably, which sounds quite harsh, like a level of like emotional detachment.
Yeah.
But as a parent now, like there is nothing Nina could do. Nothing. Like we see these horrible situations of like predominantly kids in America who do like commit mass murders, and the parents still stand by them, right? Just because there's this such depth to the relationship. Yeah, it's unreal. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. And that, like, my parents have been so good with me this for my whole life, really, but in this past year especially. But we had a big conversation the other night, and it was so nice to just kind of hear their thoughts, because I never really took the time to ask them like how this has all affected them. And you know, like just to hear some of the things that, you know, I've put them through, it's mental. But then you don't think about family when you're in your darkest points, and like there's just something that's a unique bond there. And like you said, when you first met Nina for the first time, you just felt a sudden rush, a love for something. And like with you coming from that family of the broken family, and you know, it was toxic at times, and like, is that inspired you to be like, I'm going to show this kid what a family is, and like I'm going to...
I think there's a few things in that. So for me, it felt like it closed something else off, right? So there was this like, this is my family now. Katie, Nina and I, we're the family, right? So it closed things off. And yeah, there's something quite freeing for me, right? I didn't grow up around a loving like mum and dad, right? And I didn't have a father figure growing up. But there's something quite freeing in that, because I now don't have the pressure of like expectations of, I mean, there's a lot of people that are like, this is how my parents were, this is how our relationship needs to be.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people, particularly males, really feeling the pressure of their own father, right, and living up to them. I don't have any of that. So there's like this complete liberation of like just being able to feel it out for myself and just like, yeah, figure it out as I go. And I'm quite I go based on intuition. And I think parenting, if you can get rid of a lot of the noise around you, like it can be intuitively led, right? Even as a young baby, Nina could in some way communicate she needed something. In her early weeks and months, it was like, I either need my nappy changed or I need some of the boob, right? So it's quite straightforward. I said straightforward, I didn't mean to downplay that. But so for me, it was very much like, yeah, just trying to be like intrinsically led and letting her guide us and trusting in that. So in some ways, coming from that kind of broken family has been liberating. Yeah. So there's pros and cons to it, right? There's pros and cons, but for me, it's mostly been pros. It's been a freeing thing.
I know, and it's funny. Like I was saying this to my brother as well. It's just, these are so natural at it. Like I'm at this stage in my life where, you know, I'm a single 32-year-old guy living at his mum and dad's and no job, and like all my friends around me are having kids and moving into nicer houses and getting married and stuff like that, and I'm seeing that. But at the same point, I'm seeing how amazing they are at it, and like with you, with Nina, like our relationship's always been like through times where you would never have, there was no kids involved, so I'd never seen you interact with kids, and then as soon as I see you with her, I'm just like, it's just a natural, man.
It's a weird thing, like you say, it's like that it adds this extra dimension, because I didn't have any kind of kids around me growing up. The last few years, I was kind of, as I was integrating into Katie's family, started to get her nieces and nephews and things, or meet her nieces and nephews and be around a bit more children. But I wasn't really around children, so it's not something that necessarily I thought was going to be natural. But I guess when you're just kind of like guided by that depth of love, it just is. It becomes something that's quite easy. But yeah, it's funny, like, yeah, it kind of creates a complete, I've become a different person again. And then there's a dynamic. I was listening to Seth Rogen on a podcast recently, and he was talking about this idea that him and his wife decided they didn't want children.
Right.
And at the time it was quite they weren't 100% sure, but he says now he's through that and they've kind of closed that off. It's not happening. He says he feels it's the best decision they've ever made.
Wow.
which, irrespective of the decision, he was just more talking about the relationship he has with his wife. As soon as you have a child, your relationship with your wife becomes something different. Do you mean there's a second relationship to manage there? So Katie and I, husband and wife, we're now parents as well. And it's hard to wear both of those hats. It's a really tricky thing. So yeah, we work hard on getting time together without Nina. We're really fortunate. Katie's mum helps us out a lot and takes Nina usually once a month overnight. So we get some time to do things and just try and continue to work on that relationship. But yeah, it kind of, the arrival of a child creates this almost new role. If you think of it like a job role, it's like you're thrust into this new job role that you're like, I don't have the fucking qualification for this. Like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, I know. And it sounds like meeting Katie's done a massive life-changing thing for you as well, because like when you first met, you were at that point where you were going out all the time and you were living that student life, and then all of a sudden, like that change and you happened. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just meaning like, you know what they say, there's behind every great man there's a better woman, and you know, like Katie has been such a good person for you, and he's a total match.
And I didn't take it as a bad thing at all. It's been an amazing thing. Like, she's offered me, I think I said this in our wedding vows as well, she's offered me a stability that I've never had in my life, and it's like, it's been a platform to build from, right? Yeah. I think once I met Katie and I had that, for the first time, a healthy relationship, right? In my previous relationship, we were very young. We both came from like pretty challenging environments. It was very toxic, but we kind of just clung to each other because there was like some kind of certainty or stability, but it wasn't a healthy relationship. When I met Katie, there was just like, it's a very healthy, she's a very like quite emotionally mature at times. She thinks she's called herself emotionally immature recently, but she's quite emotionally mature, and our relationship was just completely based on trust, and it was like this level of stability that I'd never experienced. And I think about how much I've grown since meeting her, like on a personal level, like in kind of business and professional level. Like, once I had that stability in place, I found this like real love of like learning, which I suspect most people have when they're young. So when they're in school, I think to some extent, or maybe it's after school when they go out, if they get a trade or something like that, there's this desire to like seek and absorb knowledge. I never really had that. I feel like I didn't really have the structure around me to tap into that capacity. But since I've met Katie, there's just been this like stability that has allowed me to just like rock it.
Yeah,
I'm a completely different person now.
And what else have you got going on in your life that you want to share?
For me, as I said, I'm kind of quite huckled in just now between work, family, and just health. Signed up to do a sprint triathlon.
Oh, yeah.
So I signed up for it in 2019, and unfortunately, there was a global pandemic and I didn't have to do it. So that worked out well. That worked out really well. For some reason, I got off with it, but then for some reason I thought, I'm going to sign up for it again and do it. I've always had this kind of desire to try and do something like that. Yeah. So signed up for it. It's happening in August. I'm having a second baby in August, so I don't know how that's going to go. But similar to what I was saying about, like, I'm not necessarily attached to the outcome. I'm going to train for it. I'm going to work towards it and see what happens. I might not be able to attend the event, but what I'll likely do is do the sprint triathlon on my own. I'll see what happens, but I'm just going to work towards it with the intent of doing it one way or another. So that's keeping things going just now. But business is the main thing for me. I really want to expand and grow, looking at bringing in another trainer, starting to get to the stage where I could even do with an assistant. And it's like, when I hear myself saying these things, it's like, Jesus Christ, how did I get to this stage? Like, it all sounds pretty like serious stuff, but it's starting to get to the point now where in order to grow further, I need to take some next steps. So I'm just kind of huckled in and focusing on those just now.
Brilliant. And where can the people find you online and find your business online?
So you'll find us online at Thrive, BOW for Bridge of Weir. That's on Instagram, Facebook, not particularly active on those things, partly why I'm going to try and get an assistant so we can have more of an online presence. You'll find myself at Jamie Scott Personal Training, at Jamie Scott Personal Training, and I've got websites for both those as well, but yeah, I'm not overly prolific online.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming on and celebrating this 10th episode with me. It's been a huge honour to have you, and I wanted to mark it. I know you were supposed to come on like maybe episode 2, but I wanted to make it a landmark episode to have you on, and I'm so glad. So thank you very much for coming on.
Well, mate, it's been an honour to be here, and seriously, big shout out to you, because this is incredible. Like, it's almost surreal being here, because I've been like, heard so much about it from you, listened to all the podcasts, also seen the stuff you're doing online. Like, being here is a really surreal experience. But yeah, big shout out to you, because as we were saying earlier, like 6 months ago it was a dream, now it's reality, right?
Yeah, and as you were saying, it is weird, like all these lights on us and stuff like that, and it's starting to feel a bit more natural for me. This is probably the first conversation we've ever had in this environment, and it is still surreal to me, but it's starting to I'm getting used to it.
Nice.
But thank you so much for coming on, and we'll see you next Tuesday.